Good morning, students. Welcome to the presentation on cardiovascular system. In today's class, we will discuss about various diseases of cardiovascular system such as angina pectoris, arrhythmias, stroke, and we will also discuss about various points like therapy as well as some important GPAT bits for cardiovascular system. Okay, are you getting the screen, students? Students, are you getting the screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, right. So first of all, let us discuss about the angina, right? I hope all of you know what this angina pectoris is. Angina is nothing but strangling pain in the chest. Angina happens due to the blockade of coronary artery. So there are three major arteries supplying the blood to the heart. Earlier we discussed that already. So if any one of these major arteries are clogged due to the buildup of atheroma, right? So which is also called atherosclerosis. So due to the buildup of atheroma are nothing but buildup of atheroma composed of, as we discussed earlier, so they are composed of foam cells as well as collagen, calcium, and many other inflammatory cells are going to build up the atheroma, which is going to cause sclerosing of the arteries, right? So sclerosing is hardening of the arteries. So when they build up, so these arteries are going to get clogged up. Okay, so these clogged arteries, so as you can observe, so here, so such kind of clogged arteries are going to uh, narrow down the blood supply, and because the blood supply is narrowed, further blood supply to the part of heart where this particular artery is supplying blood will be interrupted. So this leads to angina pectoris. Okay, so basically angina pectoris is strangling pain in the chest. Okay, so this strangling pain in the chest occurs due to insufficient blood supply, and also that causes hypoxia. And as you can see, so that kind of strangling pain radiates from the chest to the left arm, and also sometimes it radiates from the belly button to the jaw. So these are symptoms of angina pectoris. Particularly in case of angina pectoris, what exactly happens is your heart will be unable to pump sufficient amount of blood as per the demand. Okay, so let us see the mechanism of angina pectoris through a simple diagram. So basically this is your oxygen supply, and just and this is your oxygen demand, right? So as per the demand, there should be supply of oxygen, otherwise that could cause pump failure or circulatory failure, right? So generally in a person who is normal, there will be both preload and afterload assisting. So preload, this is wall tension, and this is afterload, right? So preload is pressure on the right atrium before filling of the right and left atrium and right atrium and ventricles, right? Whereas afterload is after the blood is pumped out of the left ventricle, so whatever the pressure is present, so that is called afterload. So generally this afterload, if afterload increases, it increases the workload on the heart, and thereby it causes eccentric uh, um, cardiomyography, right? Cardiomyotrophy, right? So that means eccentric means So the thickness of the wall increases. Okay, whereas in case of increased preload, volume increases. So because of increased volume, that causes concentric cardiomyopathy. Okay, so in both the cases, so whether it is this one, whether it is concentric or eccentric, right? So there is an increased load. So this increased load wouldn't be able to uh, I mean, this increased load is going to ultimately cause the heart to fail to pump, right? So that is actually the next stage of angina. However, in case of exactly in case of angina, sorry, let me delete the annotations, right? So exactly in the case of angina, what happens is right, you can observe here. In the case of angina, so can you see the arrow also, students? Students, can you see the arrow also?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. So generally, in a healthy subject, as you can observe, if the blood was normally when the person is under rest, so the blood vessels would be narrow. But when the person is working or when the person is doing some physical exercise, the blood vessels would widen to give more blood supply to the heart, so that heart pumps sufficient amount of blood supply to throughout the body. Whereas in the case of patients with coronary sclerosis, coronary artery sclerosis, right? So which we discussed earlier. So this kind of coronary artery sclerosis is going to narrow down the blood supply because of the sclerosed artery, right? So as the arteries are already narrowed, so in order to increase the blood supply to the narrowed coronary artery, so there will be compensatory dilation in the arterioles. Okay, so this compensatory dilation already is taking place in the coronary artery occluded patients. So right now, when such patients are undergoing angina, so angina means, as we just discussed earlier, so narrow when they are working something, when they are doing some physical work, or when they are doing some physical activity, exercise, so this has to widen the arteries and increase the blood supply. But here already the arteries are widened and unable to increase the blood supply anymore. So this could cause hypoxia and chest pain in the angina affected people. So basically, this kind of angina kind of condition can be classified into 4 types, right? So class 1 is uh, uh, a lower grade angina where ordinary physical activity does not produce any kind of angina, whereas second class of angina is slight limitation or ordinary in the ordinary activity. Generally angina occurs on walking or climbing uh, stairs rapidly or walking uphill. So doing a limited work could cause angina in case of class 2, and class 3 marked limitations in the ordinary physical activity. So these 3 are called stable angina. Okay, these 3 are called stable angina, class 1 to 3. Class 4 is called unstable angina. Means in case of unstable angina, even if the person is not doing any work, even if the person is taking rest, that could still produce chest pain. So that is unstable angina, also called as grade 4 angina. So the clinical representations include many episodes of ischemia do not cause symptoms of angina. So in that case, it is called silent ischemia or silent angina. So in case of silent ischemia, the problem is um, the patient looks healthy. However, the patient is not getting sufficient blood supply to the heart, and suddenly it could lead to myocardial infarction. So suddenly, if it leads to myocardial infarction, that could lead to heart failure and death also, right? So this kind of silent ischemia happens in the diabetic patients. So commonly, this kind of silent ischemia happens in the diabetic patients because they will have peripheral neuropathies. So they will not have sufficient pain perception. So that could cause silent ischemia. And patients often have reproducible pattern of pain or other symptoms which appear after specific amount of exertion. So as I told you, after some amount of exertion of hypoxia only, they will perceive the pain. Okay, so these are all precipitating factors, so which includes exercise, cold environment, walking after a meal, emotional upset, fright if they are frightened or if they are angry. So all these things could precipitate the angina. And then relief occurs with rest and nitroglycerin. So generally, if the angina affected person takes rest, so generally they will get relief. Otherwise, nitroglycerin tablets, so which are nothing but they will release nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is an exclusive vasodilator, right? So nitroglycerin is going to dilate the arteries and give the sufficient blood supply, and thereby nitroglycerin produces relief over angina. And diagnosis of angina can be performed through ECG. So you can go through that later. And further treatment outcomes, right? So let us discuss about the drugs. So basically, as we just discussed, nitrates like nitroglycerin can be used as prophylaxis in angina when patients are undergoing activities to know to provoke angina, right? And calcium channel blockers are also effective as monotherapy. As we discussed earlier, there are two types of calcium channel blockers. One is cardioselective calcium channel blockers. Another one is vasoselective calcium channel blockers. So you need to remember this. So cardioselective calcium channel blockers include verapamil and diltiazem, whereas vasoselective calcium channel blockers are dipins, amlodipine, nifedipine, felodipine. All these dipins are vasoselective. So right now, as we are discussing about angina, which is a specific disorder to the cardiac, specific disorder of the vascular system, right? So because of this, we should specifically give dipins like amlodipine, which will specifically dilate and thereby increase the blood supply to the heart. Further, beta blockers can also be administered. So beta blockers has a different action. Beta blockers are going to reduce the heart rate, isn't it? So beta blockers, by acting on the beta 1 receptors on the heart, they reduces the heart rate. So basically they reduce the load on heart, and thereby beta blockers are protective in case of angina. And most patients with moderate to severe angina will require both calcium channel blockers and beta blockers to control their symptoms. Further, as we are discussing just now, angina is produced by atherosclerosis, right? So because of this, anti-atherosclerotic drugs as well as antiplatelet drugs are also administered as preventive drugs to reduce the atherosclerosis and also to reduce the recurrence of heart attacks. So basically what the antiplatelet drugs does, earlier we discussed already. So let me show you. So do you want me to show you what is the effect of antiplatelet drugs, students? Do you remember it, or do you want me to show the effect of antiplatelet drugs?
One show that, sir.
Okay, good. Let me show you that. right? So as we are just discussing right now, this is a blood vessel and these are endothelial cells and these are inactivated platelets, right? Inactive platelets. And here, as you can observe, the platelets are aggregated at a place where there is a rupture in the blood vessel. Okay, so this kind of rupture in the blood vessel happens due to the atherosclerosis itself, so which we discussed earlier. So basically, in an atherosclerotic plaque, as we discussed, so the plaque is built up with the help of foam cells, smooth muscle cells, macrophages, lymphocytes. All these things are going to form the necrotic center. So this necrotic center, when it builds up very large, so this particular fibrous cap is going to get eroded and this will be removed, and this necrotic center would be exposed to the blood. So when it is exposed to the blood, these resting platelets are going to get exposed to the collagen fibers, which will then activate the platelets. So these activated platelets are going to release the thromboxane, A2, ADP, serotonin, and platelet activating factor, and all these things. So this ultimately leads to activation of many more platelets, and platelet plug is formed. So once the platelet plug is formed, so the within the platelet plug, as you can observe, this fibrinogen, so all these yellow colored spots are fibrinogen, will turn into fibrin with the help of thrombin. This fibrin thread would then completely clog the area where this kind of leakage is happened, and that leads to formation of a blood clot or nothing but a thrombus right now, right? So this thrombus is now present within the blood vessel where it is supplying to the heart. So this could lead to thromboembolism, means emboli uh, are the blood clots which are floating in the blood vessels, right? So thromboembolism could lead to blockade of a major artery or blockade of certain small capillaries which are supplying blood to the heart. So this could cause either ST segment elevated heart attack or non-ST segment elevated heart attack. So which we already discussed all these things in the angina pectoris itself, right? So how these antiplatelet drugs are acting, earlier we discussed. So some of the antiplatelet drugs like aspirin, so it inhibits the COX cyclooxygenase 1 enzyme and it inhibits the formation of thromboxane A2, right? Like in a similar manner, clopidogrel, dipyridamole, prasugrel. So these drugs act by inhibiting the P2Y12 ADP receptor. So this P2Y12 ADP receptor allows the entry of ADP into the platelet, and it allows the release of calcium, which further activates the glycoprotein 2B3A receptor. If glycoprotein 2B3A receptors are activated, platelets are activated. So now drugs such as ticlopidin, clopidogrel, prasugrel, how they act? They inhibit the entry of ADP into the platelet, and thereby they inactivate the glycoprotein 2B3A receptors. So thereby, so in this particular mechanism, basically antiplatelet drugs are going to act. Okay, so in this manner, while the antiplatelet drugs are acting, while the antiplatelet drugs are acting, so let me show you the angina presentation again. Right, blood clots within the blood vessels would be reduced. So thereby they prevent the occurrence of angina. And then anti-atherosclerotic drugs. So what are anti-atherosclerotic drugs? So atherosclerosis is formed due to hyperlipidemia. We discussed this also earlier, right? So hyperlipidemia is nothing but increased low density lipoprotein within the blood. So if low density lipoproteins are increased, so drugs such as HMG-CoA inhibitors are used. So what is the HMG-CoA? HMG-CoA is a HMG-CoA reductase, sorry. So HMG-CoA reductase is a is a specific enzyme which leads to production of mevalonic acid. So mevalonic acid is a precursor in the synthesis of cholesterol. So if HMG-CoA reductase is inhibited, mevalonic acid is not formed, thereby cholesterol is not synthesized within the liver. So if cholesterol is not synthesized within the liver, liver is going to uptake cholesterol present in the blood. So cholesterol is present in the blood in the form of low density lipoproteins. So when these low density lipoproteins are uptaken by the liver, low density lipoproteins within the blood are reduced. If the LDL in the blood is reduced, that further reduces the formation of atherosclerosis also. So thereby anti-atherosclerotic drugs such as atorvastatin, statins are particularly used, atorvastatin, lovastatin, simvastatin. So these anti-atherosclerotic drugs along with the antiplatelet drugs such as aspirin, clopidogrel kind of drugs are used in case of angina pectoris. Along with this, let me see if do I need to discuss any specific points, right? So basically treatment guideline for angina pectoris include the patient should stop smoking, and hyperlipidemia should be controlled. Low density lipoprotein particularly has to come down less than 100 mg per dl, and triglycerides should be less than 150, and HDL should be greater than 40. HDL is a good cholesterol which allows uptake of cholesterol from the body, and especially if the patient is diabetic, then glycosylated hemoglobin should be less than 7%. Then patient should go for a minimum 30 minutes of exercise 3 to 4 times per week to to improve the angiogenesis, right? So basically angiogenesis means production of new blood vessels. If an old blood vessel is being clogged due to the presence of atherosclerosis, new blood vessels has to be formed. So these new blood vessels will be formed only when the person is doing sufficient physical activity. So along while the person is taking all these nitrates and all these things, so now the person is getting sufficient blood. So along with this, if the patient also go for some kind of minimum physical exercise, within 1 to 2 years new blood vessels will be formed, and there will be no need of any kind of surgeries or any kind of angioplasty or stent placement inside the blood vessels, right? So this can prevent the further chances of heart attacks. Okay, so these are certain points about the angina pectoris. So let us now discuss about antiarrhythmic drugs. Okay, so first of all, tell me what is arrhythmias. What is arrhythmias?
Irregular heartbeat.
Students, what is arrhythmias? Are you getting
Abnormal
my
or
voice?
irregular heart
Very good.
beats,
Arrhythmias
sir.
is nothing but irregular heart rate. So why does arrhythmias occur? Why does arrhythmias occur? What are the etiological factors of arrhythmias? Right. Basically, myocardial infarction is one of the important etiological factor of arrhythmias. If the heart has already undergone, if already a part of the heart has already undergone damage, so that could cause arrhythmias. Okay. Students, the presentation is going to end up within 10 minutes. So after the 10 minutes, again you join to the same link. Again, we will start the presentation in continuation. Okay, if it breaks, you join to the class again, right? So during this arrhythmias, there will be increased firing of synaptic fibers, right? So let us discuss about arrhythmias, right? So basically, this is the action potential. So this we discussed earlier itself. So action potential is made up of various cycles. Initial depolarization, that is called zero phase, and then transient repolarization, that is called first phase. During the initial depolarization, sodium enters inside the membrane. During the transient repolarization, potassium goes outside, or during the partial repolarization, potassium goes outside and sodium channels close. And during the phase 2, are also known as plateau phase, calcium enters inside and potassium goes outside. So during this phase, the heart undergoes contraction. Okay, that particular part of the heart, whether it is atrium or ventricle. Okay, so then the third phase is complete repolarization or full repolarization. So during this full repolarization, potassium goes completely out and sodium also goes out through the sodium potassium ATPase pump, and finally the membrane potential reaches the resting membrane potential, which is somewhere around minus 70 millivolts. Then during the fourth phase, also known as forward current, so during this particular phase, slow sodium conductance happens. Slowly some sodium channels start opening, and later on suddenly many voltage sensitive sodium channels open to again produce a phase 0 depolarization curve. Okay, so generally there is an increased effective refractory period in a cardiovascular action potential compared to a normal skeletal muscles action potential, which we discussed earlier. This is a skeletal muscles action potential and contraction and relaxation of a skeletal muscle, whereas you can observe the cardiac muscles action potential is completely different. So in case of a cardiac muscle, as you can observe, after the depolarization and plateau phase, contraction is occurring, and after the repolarization phase, relaxation is occurring. So in this manner, a cardiac muscle fiber always ensures that multiple cardiac accident potentials are not occurring at the same time. So which is called a muscle twitch. So generally in case of a skeletal muscle twitches happen. Okay, also called as muscle spasm. Okay, so during these muscle twitches, there will be rapid contraction and relaxation of skeletal muscles, whereas such kind of rapid contraction and relaxation of heart is generally not warranted. It should not happen. Suppose if it happens, that is called arrhythmia. Such kind of rapid contraction and relaxation is called arrhythmia. So in order to prevent arrhythmias, drugs used are sodium channel blockers. So basically, we have just seen during the depolarization, sodium channels are going to be opened, activated. There are two types of gates in the sodium channel. One is M gate, another one is H gate. So H gates are opened when the sodium channels reach a specific threshold potential, generally somewhere around minus 50 millivolts. After that, while this threshold potential is reached, M gates are also opened. So when M gates are opened, sudden increase in action potential happens through the entry of sodium channels. And once the action potential reaches somewhere around 30 to 40 millivolts, plus 30 to 40 millivolts, these sodium channels will get inactivated by closing the H gate, and this is what happens. So now some of the local anesthetics like lidocaine are going to act in this particular manner. They are going to act on the sodium channels in order to produce reducing the or in order to reduce the depolarizing potentials. So this is an example of an early after depolarization which arises from the plateau phase. As you can observe, this is a actually what has to happen after the depolarization. Plateau phase has to occur and a resting potential has to takes place. Okay, let me show you. So the actual action potential should be like this. But what is happening in this case? in this case a different phenomenon is taking place. So this action potential is not the, the plateau phase is getting prolonged, and and another depolarization is occurring even before the action potential is undergoing into resting phase, right? So this is called an early after depolarization, and then this is a delayed after depolarization. Delayed after depolarization means, so generally after this action potential, an action potential has to occur, a complete action potential has to occur over here, but here a delayed after depolarization is occurring, which arises the resting membrane potential only slightly, and this could cause arrhythmia again. So these kind of arrhythmias could be caused due to multiple mechanisms. So one kind of mechanism is unidirectional block, right? So generally in a normal case, the action potential occurs in this manner. So a nerve impulse being received from the some generally, let's say the SA node itself, right? So the Purkinje fibers are also nothing but kind of nerves, right? So these Purkinje fibers receive a nerve impulse like this. So this impulse is going to travel on both sides of the ventricle wall. But when these two impulses are collided, so as you can observe, these two impulses could collide each other, and here they are neutralized. Okay, at this spot they are neutralized. However, if there is an unidirectional block, so generally unidirectional block occurs due to myocardial infarction. If a part of the cardiac muscle is dead, so that could cause, so here as you can observe, there is an unidirectional block due to myocardial infarction. So this could cause blockade of supply to one direction. However, this particular wave which is traveling on another direction is now going to re-enter in a retrograde direction. It is going to re-enter, and towards the point 1 it moves again. So in this case what exactly happens is, so the nerves which are supplying towards point 2 are going to supply the action potential once, and towards 1 they supply the action potential twice. Okay, so that could cause 2 times constriction. Here it could cause only 1 time constriction. So within the heart itself, one part is getting contracted twice and another part is getting contracted only once. So this could ultimately cause arrhythmias. Okay. Um, okay, this is all right. Let us discuss about types of arrhythmias. So types of arrhythmias include extrasystole. So an atrial extrasystole means one more systole happens than normal. Atrial fibrillation, so around 300 to 500 beats per minute, and irregular and disorganized rhythm is going to happen. And in case of atrial flutter, regular and synchronous, but the heart rate is around 200 to 300 350 beats per minute. That is very high. And then ventricular extrasystole, tachycardia and fibrillation. So based on each and every, based on the severity they are categorized. Extrasystole, one more systole. Tachycardia, increased heart rate but it is rhythmic. And fibrillation, irrhythmic, and during fibrillation, irregular rapid contraction of ventricles is going to take place, and blood cannot be pumped out, and this could lead to fatal arrhythmias. Okay, so are you able to observe the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So so just until now we discussed about various types of arrhythmias, right? So let me also show you how these arrhythmias occurs with a simple example. Earlier I already discussed this. So suppose if the heart is normally beating in for each beat it takes around 0.8 seconds, 72 beats per minute, right? So it takes 0.8 seconds, right? So lub dub, lub dub, lub dub, right? So this is normal beat, but in case of irregular rapid contraction, so which occurs in case of ventricular fibrillation, so there won't be complete relaxation, so it is going to beat very fast like this. So I hope during this video you couldn't be able to even observe. So it opens very narrowly and close, very narrow opening and close. So this kind of very fast beat is ultimately fatal to the heart, and that could cause uh, fatal arrhythmias. So that could cause death, right? So class 1 anti-arrhythmic drugs. So basically class 1 anti-arrhythmic drugs, so class are further classified as class 1A, 1B and 1C, right? So class 1 anti-arrhythmic drugs are moderate anti-arrhythmic drugs, and class 1B are for in case of severe arrhythmias, and class 1C are again for moderate arrhythmias, right? So class 1A drugs are going to cause slow phase 0 depolarization. As you can clearly observe, they are going to turn the phase 0 are there, sorry, tilt, they are going to slightly tilt the phase 0 depolarization, and thereby they increases the effective refractory period. Whereas class 1B, so which are used for severe, right? So they are going, class 1B drugs are going to shorten the phase 3 depolarization and decrease the duration of action potential. So that is class 3. So class 1B, right? So class 1C are slowly, they are going to slowly dissociate from resting sodium channels, and class 1C is approved for refractory ventricular tachyarrhythmias, right? So so generally class 1 drugs are used in case of atrial or AV junctional or ventricular tachyarrhythmias. So drugs such as mixilitin and tolkainide can be used chronically for oral use in the patient suffering from arrhythmias. And class 2 drugs are beta blockers. Class 1 drugs are sodium channel blockers, as we just discussed, and class 2 drugs are beta blockers. So drugs such as esmolol, metoprolol, and propranolol, they are going to diminish the phase 4 depolarization and thus depressing the automaticity and prolonging the conduction. As we just discussed earlier, basically class 2 drugs are nothing but the beta blockers are the drugs which could cause bradycardia, means they can reduce the heart rate. So in those people who are having rhythmic tachycardia, okay, try to understand. So even though it is categorized as arrhythmia, it is generally a rhythmic tachycardia, or particularly if it is causing ventricular tachycardia, specifically if it is causing ventricular tachycardia, if you use beta blockers, so these arrhythmias can be reduced. And propranolol reduces incidence of sudden arrhythmic death after myocardial infarction. So after a myocardial infarction, there is a possibility of sudden arrhythmias, so which could lead to ventricular flutter and death. So as we just discussed in the last slide. So propranolol can reduce such kind of incidences, and metoprolol is mostly used class 2 drug, and compared to propranolol, it reduces the risk of bronchospasm. Basically, metoprolol is a specific cardioselective beta blocker because it blocks only beta 1. It doesn't block beta 2, whereas propranolol also blocks beta 2, right? So that is class 2 drugs and class 3 drugs. So class 3 drugs include potassium channel blockers. So potassium channel blockers diminish the outward potassium current, and thereby they are going to increase the effective refractory period and relapse the occurrence of sudden heart attacks. And further, drugs such as amiodarone is having complex effects showing class 1, 2, 3, and 4 actions, and particularly they are used in severe refractory supraventricular or ventricular tachyarrhythmias. However, these class 3 drugs has a very important side effect, right? So if class 3 drugs are overused, they can cause, so as you can observe, these are drugs which can prolong the repolarization. Okay, if excess of class 3 drug is administered, that could cause arrhythmias. Try to understand, an anti-arrhythmic drug which can produce arrhythmias is class 3 drug. Try to understand clearly, an anti-arrhythmic drug which can precipitate arrhythmias is class 3 drugs, nothing but amiodarone, right? So why? The reason is class 3 drugs are blocking the refractory, are blocking the repolarization phase by reducing the potassium outward current. So in case if potassium outward current is chronically blocked due to excess usage of drug, so that could cause calcium ions to stay within the um, cardiac muscle cell, and it could cause arrhythmias. So so in order to prevent that, class 3 drugs need to be used with utmost care, and dofetilide can be used as first line antiarrhythmic agent in patients with persistent atrial fibrillation and heart failure. So try to understand, so the past two classes of drugs are particularly used for ventricular tachyarrhythmias, okay, whereas class 3 drugs are particularly used for atrial fibrillation, okay. Then class 4 drugs are calcium channel blockers, right? So as we discussed earlier, cardioselective calcium channel blockers specifically, right? So dipins are vasoselective. Here we need to use either verapamil or diltiazem. So what the calcium channel blockers does, as you can observe, calcium channel blockers are a specific drugs to the SA node and AV node, specifically to the AV node. The reason is AV node is the one which would cause most of the ventricular tachyarrhythmias. Okay, ventricular tachyarrhythmias are majorly produced by AV node. So if class 4 drugs are used, as you can observe, phase 4 depolarization is slowed down, and because of that, ultimately the impulse refractory period increased. So while the impulse refractory period increases, so the number of beats are also reduced. Our number of sinus rhythms occurred at the AV node would also be reduced. Okay, so here students don't get confused with the action potential being discussed with first three classes of drugs. So in the first three classes of drugs, whatever we have seen is a cardiac action potential, but this one is an AV nodal action potential. So there is a difference between cardiac action potential and AV nodal action potential. Here you can observe. So this is SA nodal action potential, which just looks like a hill. Okay, another one is AV node. So this is also an AV nodal action potential which has a very brief plateau phase. Okay, whereas you can observe the action potential of atrium, which is looking like a cardiac action potential. You can observe the Purkinje fibers, ventricles. Okay, so basically a cardiac action potential will have a increased effective refractory period compared to the SA node and AV node. SA node and AV node are a part of the cardiac conductive system. So they are just nothing but a kind of nervous system present within the heart. So so as you can observe, the calcium channel blockers like verapamil and diltiazem, they affect the AV nodal impulses, not the cardiac action potential. Okay. So by decreasing the inward current carried by calcium, verapamil and diltiazem slow the conduction and prolong the effective refractory period in tissues that are dependent on calcium current, such as AV node. So as we just discussed, and it is used for reentrant supraventricular tachycardia. What is reentrant supraventricular tachycardia? We have just seen as an example here. So this is re-entry. Okay, so this kind of reentrant supraventricular tachycardia could be reduced with the help of class 4 drugs. Okay. Basically, tell me what is stroke. Okay, can anyone tell me, can anyone just tell me what is stroke? Stroke ante enti cheppandamma. Stroke or shock ante enti cheppandi. Cheppandamma. Can't you explain? You don't need to explain, just tell
Diminished
me.
cardiac output, sir.
Very good. So diminished cardiac output. So why the cardiac output get diminished?
Blood volume
No, it's not about blood volume. So I already discussed about stroke. Stroke is nothing but cardiac failure. Okay, stroke is just nothing but cardiac failure. Why heart fails to pump? Why does heart fails to pump? Right, heart fails to pump because heart doesn't have sufficient ability to pump. Already the heart has undergone many morbid changes, and that's why heart is unable to pump. Okay, so basically stroke or a heart failure occurs due to either increased pressure overload or increased volume overload. So we discussed earlier, right? So there are two different types of cardiomyopathy. So which include cardiac hypertrophy, are also known as eccentric hypertrophy. So in this case, as you can observe, so these are various phases of cardiac remodeling. So students, can you observe this diagram clearly? Can you observe this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
These are various phases of cardiac remodeling. So this is the normal heart. So after an acute load, the size of left ventricle slightly increases, and this is just an increased volume. Okay. Further, if further there is an increased load, especially if there is an afterload, particularly afterload occurs due to increased blood pressure. If the patient is suffering from hypertension, right? So you need to give some medication to reduce the hypertension. Otherwise, that could lead to compensatory eccentric cardiac hypertrophy. Okay. So this eccentric hypertrophy, as you can observe, what is increasing here? Can anyone tell me what is increasing here? Volume or thickness?
Thickness, sir.
Ventricular wall thickness is increasing. Okay, so this is compensatory hypertrophy, which occurs at the moderate stage of cardiac remodeling, and then later on a systolic failure occurs, right? So later on the volume further increases, and this could cause systolic failure, and this is dilated cardiomyopathy, also known as cardiomegaly. Means the size of heart will be very big, right? So generally, I hope all of you remember the size of heart should be around the size of your fist. Okay, suppose if the size of heart is very much more than size of the fist, so you can just say that it is cardiomegaly. So generally, this kind of cardiac remodeling occurs in the elderly. So people who are lying somewhere around 60 to 70 years, so this kind of cardiomegaly occurs, and particularly this kind of dilated cardiomyopathy occurs in the very old age, so somewhere around 80s to 90s, right? So in that case this occurs, right? So what exactly happens in case of stroke is heart wouldn't be able to pump the blood. Okay, so in the treatment for stroke is to make the heart to pump the blood. That's all. There is no other treatment, right? So if the heart is undergoing stroke, so it is so people generally don't say it is stroke alone. The people say it is heart stroke or brain stroke, right? So heart stroke means heart stopped pumping. So why the heart stopped pumping? So because it has already undergone some remodeling and it is unable to undergo any more remodeling, and it is unable to compensate the blood supply. So in that case, certain drugs can be administered. So for the heart failure, drugs such as diuretics are life-saving, right? So why diuretics need to be used? The function of diuretics is to reduce the volume overload. Okay, so volume overload means if there is more volume of blood and more volume of fluid within the body, so this has to be removed in order to reduce the volume overload, as you have seen just now. So this systolic failure and dilated cardiomyopathy occurs due to volume overload, also known as increased preload. Okay, so preload can be increased by employing the diuretics for a long term. And then beta blockers. What the beta blockers does? They stop the progression of compensatory hypertrophy. So from acute load to the compensatory hypertrophy. So this stage can be reduced by employing the beta blockers. So what the beta blockers does, they reduce the afterload, they reduce the heart rate, and thereby they reduce the afterload. And AC inhibitors are highly protective. They reduce both the preload and afterload. What the AC inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers does, they are going to inhibit the release of angiotensin, or they will stop the angiotensin's action at the angiotensin receptor 1. Okay, so AC inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers are very much effective drugs for the case of heart failure. So basically these drugs are, earlier I discussed this again and again. So again I'm telling you, this is a very important point. AC inhibitors and ARBs are cardioprotective, renoprotective, vasoprotective. Okay, cardio, reno, vaso. They can protect all these three systems: kidney, heart, blood vessels. Okay, then apart from that, aldosterone receptor antagonists such as spironolactone. So these spironolactone kind of drugs act as diuretics. They reduce the volume overload. Further, these drugs are also going to increase the potassium concentration within the body. So, when potassium concentration is increased, load on the heart is decreased due to potassium is the one responsible for the relaxation or nothing but the repolarization. If potassium is reduced in the body, that could cause increased load on the heart. Suppose if potassium is increased in the body, that could reduce the load on the heart. Okay, so aldosterone receptor antagonists like spironolactone are going to save the heart by increasing the potassium concentration. Okay, so these are all various drugs used for the heart failure, which includes inotropic drugs. So inotropic drugs are drugs that can increase the force of contraction. Okay, what are chronotropy? What are chronotropy? What is meant by chronotropy and inotropy? Inotropy ante, inotropy means increased. Just now I told you. Force of contraction. Chronotropy.
Heartbeat increases.
Heart rate.
Heart
Number.
rate. You should say heart rate, not beat. Right. So increased number of beats. Okay. Nothing but heart rate increases. Okay. Chrono means number. You just remember like that. Chrono means number. Ino means force. I know ions are responsible for the force. Okay, so chronotropy is increased heart rate. So these drugs, inotropic drugs, are going to increase the force of contraction. So the basic problem in case of heart failure is force of contraction is reduced. The reason is basically heart is dilated here. In this case, heart is dilated. So because the heart is dilated, so just imagine this like a loosened rubber band. Okay, imagine this like a loosened rubber band. Okay, this loosened rubber band cannot contract up to this stage. Okay, so the relaxed stage of rubber band is this one, right? So when in this particular case, in order to increase the force of contraction, you can use drugs such as digoxin, dobutamine, dopamine, or milrinone, right? So basically we discussed the mechanisms of all these drugs. So digoxin and ouabain, these are cardiac glycosides which inhibits sodium potassium ATPase pump. We discussed already, right? So distalis or digoxin blocks the sodium potassium ATPase pump, which in turn inhibits the exchange of sodium calcium exchange. Okay, so this ultimately leads to retaining of calcium within the cardiac muscle cell, and this retained cardiac muscle calcium within the cardiac muscle cell increases the force of contraction. We have already discussed this is a normal person. This black colored curve depicts a normal person with increased cardiac output. So when the with the increased end diastolic pressure, with increased end diastolic pressure, cardiac output has to increase. Okay, as you can observe, with increased end diastolic pressure, cardiac output increases in a normal person. But what is happening in a person affected with heart failure? So this is a heart failure person, right? So with increased end diastolic pressure, cardiac output is not increasing. Here cardiac output is very high, but here the cardiac output is very low, right? So even if the end diastolic pressure is increasing, cardiac output is not increasing. So if cardiac output is not increasing, blood supply is not happening. So in order to improve the blood supply, if we use distalis, so from C to D is transformation from distalis. So if we use distalis, it increases the force of contraction and thereby cardiac output is increased. With increased end diastolic pressure, cardiac output is also increased. Okay, so that is the action of digoxin. And then drugs such as milrinone, phosphodiesterase 3 inhibitors. Somewhere I have given, I think, isn't it? No, I didn't give the mechanism here, but however, it is very simple. Phosphodiesterase 3 is an enzyme which breaks down the cyclic AMP. Do you remember cyclic AMP? So what is the function of cyclic AMP? It it do not let the calcium to go outside. Okay, it do not let the calcium to go outside. So if cyclic AMP is broken, calcium can contract the muscle and go outside, right? So when cyclic AMP is preserved, this with the help of phosphodiesterase 3 inhibitors, so calcium is going to get preserved within the cardiac muscle cell, thereby it increases the force of contraction. And dopamine and dobutamine, these are direct sympathomimetics, means they are going to act on the beta 1 receptor and thereby they are going to produce increased heart rate. So try to understand, except these sympathomimetics, these are only inotropic, but sympathomimetics are ino and chronotropic. Okay, these drugs are ino and chronotropic, both heart rate and force increases. Okay, so as we just discussed, diuretics, aldosterone antagonists, beta adrenergic blockers, vasodilators, and renin angiotensin system inhibitors are used in case of stroke. Okay, so you have my presentation, you can go through and you can ask me if you have any doubts. Okay, then now tell me, so what's next? What shall we discuss next?
Sir, what is the meaning of dronotropy, sir?
Drono kadamma, chrono, chrono, chrono.
Sir, like chronotropy, ionotropy, bromotropy, and dronotropy is also is there, no, sir?
Bromo and dronotropy.
Dronotropy, sir.
Dronotropy. So let me check right now. Even I never heard about the dronotropy or dronography. Okay, just a minute. Okay, ma. It is dromotropy. DROMO. Okay, DROMO, dromotropy. So these dromotropic drugs are those drugs which leads to depressed electrical conduction, means drugs which can reduce the force of contraction. These are called cardio inhibitory drugs. Some of the toxins. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Just tell me, do you have any other doubts?
Sir,
Okay. చెప్పండి.
sir, irreversible binding అంటే ఏంటి సార్?
ఇర్రివర్సిబుల్ బైండింగ్ అంటే ఏం లేదమ్మా, జస్ట్ ఇమాజిన్ డ్రగ్ అండ్ రిసెప్టార్ లైక్ ఏ లాక్ అండ్ కీ. ఓకే, లాక్ అండ్ కీ లాగా ఇమాజిన్ చేసుకోండి. జనరల్ గా లాక్, ఐ మీన్ లాక్ లోపల కీ పెట్టి తిప్పిన తర్వాత కీ దానికే ఫిక్స్ అయిపోయి ఉందనుకోండి, కీ ఇంకా రాదు బయటికి. అర్థమైందా? వన్స్ మీరు లాక్ ఓపెన్ చేసిన తర్వాత ఇంకా కీ బయటికి రాదు, ఇంకా అక్కడ ఇరుక్కుపోయే ఉంటుంది. మీరు మళ్ళీ లాక్ వేసేంత వరకు కీ బయటికి రాదు. దాన్ని ఇర్రివర్సిబుల్ బైండింగ్ అంటారు. అర్థమైందమ్మా? కాలేదు అంటే ఒకసారి డ్రగ్ వెళ్ళి రిసెప్టార్కి బైండ్ అయినప్పుడు రిసెప్టార్లో యాక్షన్ చూపిస్తుంది కదా. సో డ్రగ్ వెళ్ళి రిసెప్టార్కి బైండ్ అయిపోయి ఇంకా రిసెప్టార్ నుంచి బయటికి రాదు. డ్రగ్ అక్కడ ఎప్పుడు రిసెప్టార్ని బ్లాక్ చేసే ఉంచుతుంది. దాన్ని ఇర్రివర్సిబుల్ బైండింగ్ అంటారు. సో ఇర్రివర్సిబుల్ బైండింగ్ డ్రగ్స్ వచ్చేసి కామన్గా మనకి ఓకే, మీకు ఏవో ఒక స్పెసిఫిక్ చాప్టర్లో ఇర్రివర్సిబుల్ బైండింగ్ గురించి కూడా చెప్పాను. ఎక్కడ చెప్పానమ్మా?
యాంటీ ప్లేట్లెట్ డ్రగ్స్.
యాంటీ ప్లేట్లెట్స్ లో క్లోపిడోగ్రెల్ ఇవి చెప్పినట్టున్నాను కదా. ఎక్సెప్ట్ ప్రాసుగ్రెల్ అండ్ టికాగ్రెల్ ఆర్ రిమైనింగ్ ఆల్ ఆర్ ఇర్రివర్సిబుల్ బైండింగ్ డ్రగ్స్. అవునా? సో వాట్ ఇర్రివర్సిబుల్ బైండింగ్ డ్రగ్స్ అంటే ఏంటి? దే విల్ బైండ్ టు ద ఏడిపి రిసెప్టార్ and they will not come out of the ADP receptor. So because of that, they ADP cannot enter inside these platelets, and these platelets will completely become inactivated for their lifetime. So if these kind of drugs are used, these platelets which are affected due to this drug will be inactivated for their lifetime. So new platelets need to be produced in order to produce again that platelet plug formation. Okay, అందుకని అట్లాంటి డ్రగ్స్ క్రానిక్ గా యూజ్ చేయకూడదు, జస్ట్ టెంపరీగా యూజ్ చేయాలి. ఓకే, సో అగైన్, సో there is only 30 seconds time, right? So if there are no other doubts, so let us disperse this meeting.